A Look Under the Shell is an Everlook Broadcasting Company production. It's time now for another Look Under the Shell. Welcome to the broadcast, everyone. I'm Dan. I am your host and moderator for this show. And joining me today are my two usual co-hosts in crime. We're going to go with the news orc himself and the person that we just spent about an hour and a half the other day geeking out over the economy and market stuff. It's Vrograg.
Hello, everyone. It's your news anchor, Vrograg. Thanks for having me on. Again, as always, happy to be here. Happy to speak with you and Akalix, too. And yes, I am also excited about that market episode of Pardon the Pummel.
That will be up on the YouTube page. If it hasn't already gone up by the time this airs, it will be going up soon for people to take a look back and listen to. That was such a fun episode. I was so happy with it. Did you get to catch it live, Vrograg?
No, I didn't. I was actually busy on Friday night. I know, kind of a shocker considering the demographics, but I had a tabletop role-playing game, so I was actually doing something even geekier than playing more Turtle WoW.
We always support nerding out here in this broadcast.
Yes, sir.
That's perfect. And then on the other side of things, helping us navigate what the team here at Turtle WoW is doing, Akalix, community manager, overseer, if you will, the eye in the sky. Good afternoon to you. It's been a couple weeks since we talked.
Yeah, it's definitely been a hot minute. There's been quite a bit that's happened, quite a few things that have been announced, as well as just things that have been finally done. I mean, we haven't done an episode since when we were talking about the release of Karazhan, talking about what sort of expectations were, what our thoughts were, all that sort of stuff. Been a hot minute.
That was definitely a big change from where we're at now, where now Karazhan 40 has been released. We have a little bit of an idea for how the community reacted. The staff here have been able to watch people kind of smash their heads against it. Vrograg and I still doing that. I believe that was launch day where you were live there, Vrograg. That was a joy to see people really start to grind against this new challenge.
Yeah, and I don't know if we want to jump right into community reaction to Kara 40 quite yet, but that initial reaction from people from within and from without the community watching, that was the much bigger stream, the opening day, where people just kept throwing themselves into the grinder that was Gnarlmoon for a long while, and eventually Incantagos before, I had done 8 hours, and I'm like, hey guys, like, I gotta not do this. It was great. It genuinely was great. I think it was a real capstone moment for the community to celebrate a long-awaited raid, and also to see, at least in what my estimation, what vanilla raiding was like. You didn't have add-ons. You had to figure stuff out the old-fashioned way, and it was difficult and it was punishing.
We didn't have a Wowhead guide that we could pull up and be like, oh, that's how you do that. Okay. Now, before we get into community and staff reactions and kind of the aftermath of Kara 40's launch, just a quick note about what this show is. Under the Shell is a way to look under the hood, almost. A look at kind of how things work at Turtle and giving a perspective to the community of these are kind of the nuts and bolts, almost. Don't necessarily always talk about mechanics per se, but certainly give you a good idea of what things look sometimes behind the scenes. And that's kind of the purpose of Under the Shell. Now, today we're not only going to be talking about a retrospective on Kara 40, but we're also going to be talking about looking to the next set of content patches. There's been some previews. There's been some things that haven't been previewed just yet. And now is a better time than ever to talk about what we have coming up. So just to kind of get this kickstarted, as Vrograg was mentioning there, let's talk about that initial community reaction. Vrograg, you were live that day. You were watching people just getting into things to start with. I was there with you for some of it, and it was a ton of fun to actually cast that. What do you think the initial community reaction to Kara 40 was?
The community's reaction was really unique and special. I don't know if I can characterize it any better way than asking for the listener right now, if you've gone to any raid, think of that moment when you first step in to your first 40 man. You've never been in there. That moment is sort of sealed away in part of your mind. I at least know for me that's the case. For Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, AQ40, and Nax, those vast landscapes and these very intimidating enemies and a challenge before you that you haven't ever dealt with. So getting to see that together with a community was very special. Obviously, a lot of the layout of the initial part of Karazhan 40 is much like TBC's Karazhan 40, but the bosses are different. And I think the community really joined together in celebrating what they had been waiting a long time for, and also realizing that even though they had Nax on farm for X amount of months or even years, that this was going to be difficult. And most people were excited about the challenge. And I think that's something that's very telling about, in general, I think vanilla players, they like the challenge. They like knowing something's difficult, and having to plan around that is something that I think is integral to the vanilla gameplay loop, really. So it was great. It was really special, and I feel very privileged to have been able to do that, grand opening. And if I haven't said it enough, Dan, thank you for saving me. That was an 8-hour long stream, and you coming in to give me a little break on my voice, really, really appreciate it. I don't know if I could have gone the full 8 without you.
It was a good time. I had a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun to participate in that. Now there are some questions I want to poke at with you, but before we move off of that initial reaction, Akalix, on the opposite side of the same coin, you and a lot of the staff were keeping a close eye on things as Kara 40 was launched. How was the initial staff reaction to its launch, and how did all of you react to how the players were approaching things?
It was very interesting, obviously. I think the best way to phrase it is to go off of something that Vrograg said right at the start of the show, of this is a lot more like an experience of a 2000 whatever raid opening rather than a classic raid. Because obviously in the modern era of Blizzard Classic, stuff like that, it's Naxxramas has almost 20 years of people who have progged it. There's more than a decade of guides. Everything has been meticulously noted down of this works this way, this works this way, this works this way. Especially now in 2025, if you were to go into a random Naxxramas group, you can Google it, you can go on YouTube, you can look anywhere, you will find 30 different guides for every individual boss's mechanic, and you can get any piece of information about it that you need.
Sure, and you can track every single step in that already. Yeah. It's been documented.
That's one thing that I think a lot of people weren't expecting to encounter with Kara. there was this sort of people were surprised when progression was really difficult for a lot of groups. And like obviously there were some groups where it wasn't as difficult, right? I'm in one of the first 2 clears of the raid, so yeah, I can come from the perspective of, oh no, it's not that hard, just do the mechanics and kill the boss. But overall, it's much more difficult than a lot of these these raids where you have easily 10 years of muscle memory built up for some veteran players where they played through Classic, they played on some other private servers, and now they've played on Turtle for a while, and they're used to, okay, every week I go in, I do my Nax mechanics. And progging Nax on a fresh character is completely different than progging Kara, especially at the very start there, because at the very start, your prog of Kara's knowledge is limited to, I know that in TBC Kara there was a boss there. I think there's a boss there on this one too.
Yeah, it was the archivist for Gnarlmoon. Like
There's a handful of
yeah, most
same
spots are the
location.
same, I think.
Yeah.
Now I
But
gotta ask, because you, Akalix, were maybe teasing people a little bit about that. Did anyone ever figure out what the archivist is doing there?
He's an apprentice of Nat Pagel.
Okay.
So yeah, no, Akalix is just
He's an absolute
further
master of
gaslighting.
baiting.
You know what? This is why you need a community voice to call out Akalix on his absolute baloney and just making up stuff and gaslighting the community. Guys, don't trust team members when you ask for secrets. They will give you answers that are not true. They want you to find it out for yourself.
And
If there were to be a way to interact with that, it would not be one that you will be given by a team member. Anything where there is a secret there, or that there's something where we can't figure that out. If it's something like a matter of, is it true or false that the first boss drops this item? That's something you'll probably get an actual answer from a team member on. Like 9 times out of 10, that's going to be legitimate. Like, oh no, that doesn't drop from that boss, or oh yes, that does. But if it's something like, where do I find Ashbringer? Why are there Ashbringer dialogues in the raid? Or how do I activate this secret NPC that nobody's figured out?
I will say, I mean, if the team put in additional whispers from corrupted Ashbringer, and we find out that there is nothing involving Ashbringer, that is a devious thing for the team to do. There are so many paladins out there that are just so hopeful, so like they'll believe it. Out of all the teaming, all the teasing I've seen the team done, that's one I'm like, that almost feels mean. That almost feels mean.
Vrograg, you're making the assumption that paladins are going to get something in the future. And we can just, diminish that thought right now. Splash it against the wall.
I'm
they're
using the past as a guide.
I'm sure they're doing fine.
Yeah. Yeah, if the past is any indication.
Get hate comments on this one.
I main a paladin, they can be mad.
I want to dial things back. I want to just dial things back a little bit, because we talked about the initial launch and our reactions to it. But another big part about Kara 40 was the imminent build up to it. The market shifts, the people coming back online and getting their characters ready for it. Vrograg, obviously, the big question I have for you is the market. How did the market respond to the run up to Kara 40? And the other big part of the question is, did it matter?
Well, I think this is a pretty complex question, because it involves what I would consider different strata of players. And I'm not trying to really make a value assessment on who the better or superior player is, because the answer is role players. But when separating
Wait a second.
raiders,
Hold on a second.
when separating raiders, right? There are speed running groups, like what many people would colloquially known as like very sweaty, very try hard organizations that have lots of free time, do a lot of farming. And then maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum, you might have new raiders, or even much more casual raiders, people who just like to log on, knock back a few beers, chat with their friends, and do raiding, right? And so I think the market has affected different types of raiders differently. Now, there was a huge spike in certain reagents, certain consumables. One that comes to mind is Elemental Earth saw a pretty sharp spike because one of the bosses, a mechanic, which I don't even know if the teams even fully acknowledge that that was the intended way of fighting it, but involved a restoration potion that requires Elemental Earth. And that put a big pressure on Elemental Earth because many people knew about, for instance, needing things like arcane protection potions. People knew that was coming. They knew there was an arcane elemental boss. So actually, the market had time to adjust to that. It still went up, but it didn't. It wasn't very volatile. People knew it. People could adjust, but I don't think many people expected the run up on Elemental Earth in response to it. And some of the other protection potions went a little haywire, but fortunately, the team preempted this sort of raid release about a little over a year ago with a big economy change that made herbs more accessible, that made farming the materials, not necessarily the gold, but the materials to get a lot of these things a lot more easy. So the market definitely went up. There was a lot more activity, but I don't think it was the sort of doomsday sort of market situation that the population spike of the summer of 2023 was, where the population quintupled in a couple months and the market just couldn't hang.
Listen, we don't want to bring that up. We don't want to give Jamie nightmares. Okay.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. So anyway, just finishing up on that thought. The teams that got full clears pretty early on, they kind of knew exactly what they would need. And I think for them, the market still mattered, but they were already in a good position and they could already start budgeting and cutting back on the things that they needed. Whereas a full progression group, right? If you're doing a boss and you're dying again and again, even though a lot of things persist, protection potions don't. If you get hit with the damage, they go away. Unless you die right away from an unrelated damage type, those things are essentially like regular consumables. So I think that's where the biggest market upset was, and it mostly affected groups that even to this day are still progressing.
And there's nothing wrong with that too. Each group is going to face things at their own pace. That's not bad at all. Akalix, same question in your direction, not necessarily just about the markets, but in general. What do you feel like the run-up to Kara 40 was, and was it relevant for groups, either in regards to gear, consumables, or just group preparation?
I'd say there's a lot of... It depends very heavily on what group you're referring to in terms of how well they prepared, because there were some groups that had insane preparation where everybody has nearly 300 arcane resist gear in a set just to be sure that they're safe, and went overkill on that. And there were other people who they got like 2 arcane essences, said, you know what, I'm ready for Kara, and then got met with a swift slap in the face when the arcane essence prices went up to like 25 gold a pop. And it's something where we did try to alleviate some of the pain points. One like small change we did was the trash drops got raised in value inside of Kara, just in terms of trying to make it a little bit better financially for everyone who's doing the raid to not just be burning money. But it's definitely one thing where it's a brutal spot for some of the guilds that are just on that precipice of prog, where they definitely could do it if they get the right pull, but they're also just barely under on some of the kills to where it's like, okay, it's good to full consume for this because it's just on the verge of getting the kill. So you need a full consume, but you're not able to get the kill. That's the most brutally impacted group, honestly, because like for me, Kara costs the same as Nax to me at this point. Maybe a little bit more expensive, maybe the equivalent of Nax plus one extra. Actually, for me personally, because I'm a paladin, it's the exact same because I don't need a restorative potion. But
Yeah,
overall,
exactly. It's like that.
Yeah, it's basically the same as Nax was now. It's down to a sub 2 hour run for me, so it's very, very much a affordable raid to do again. But that's the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of groups. And I remember during Prague, it was brutal. When we raided like 4 or 5 nights in 1 week, and the expectation is that you have a flask on that entire time, you're full consumed that entire time.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot.
I nuked over 1,000 gold.
Yeah.
Easily. I probably got into multiple thousands of gold, and that's just a matter of that's how Prague is sometimes.
Sure.
And it's like, it's like what I said before, where it's a matter of we're not just doing Prague in terms of how it's going to feel to Prague Nax for the first time on Turtle, where it's going to be easy. You just go in a random group and you could do Nax.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was alluding to when I talked about there's different types of raiders. Like I was fortunate enough to, when I started playing on Turtle, I was in a raid group that actually progressed all the way from Molten Core to Nax. So I'm adjusted and I know what progression's like, but I definitely know there are players that really haven't had that experience. It's not the best if you only lose. The feeling after getting a very difficult boss down after many failed attempts is way more satisfying, I would argue, than, a hour and 50-minute run and a shrug. Of course, to each their own. But I think not all players were prepared for how brutal some progression can be.
And one thing you said there, Akalix, was some people did go overboard with the arcane resist gear and found that, okay, maybe they didn't need nearly that much. That's kind of what I was most curious about with this, where I wanted to know where that balancing line was for how much prep needed to be done versus how much prep people actually put in. So that kind of answered what my initial thought was, but more points brought up there that were absolutely vital. Not to move on, because I want to make sure we get time for this. The big question in my mind is what, and this is directed specifically at you, Akalix, what did the team learn from the overall release of Karazhan 40, and how are they going to apply those lessons moving forward? Because obviously we have other things coming up here. We have, Grimbatal in the long distance future, and a tier 4 essentially that's going to happen. So where did those lessons kind of land for the team?
I'll give you a couple things in terms of goods and bads that we got from it. The biggest good thing of all is do what we did this time and do not try to release the raid on a patch release. Have it be delayed, because it was, like, in terms of actual experience, it was pretty seamless where people could just log on, go into Kara, and just do what they needed to do. And that's something where that definitely could have gone differently if we tried to do it the day of patch download release, where people wouldn't be raiding because, I have to fix my add-ons, they broke, or for some reason I can't get my this to work or that, or it's one of those things where that was a very big win. So that was one of the lessons. Another one of the lessons is that we need to be more creative in how we try to. How to even phrase it? We need to be more creative in how we try to deal with preemptively making sure that players won't find a loophole. The boss that comes to mind for that is Medivh, where the world first kill of Medivh was a group that had a insane number of shamans, and the way that they did the boss, instead of like basically any of the intended solutions we had in mind, was they just had a shaman in every single group with grounding totems, so they never, or not, maybe grounding totem, I don't remember the exact totem name because I'm not a shaman player. But
It is grounding totem. Yeah,
okay,
that's
they had a
the one.
grounding totem in
I'm
every
still
single
bitter
group,
about it.
where it just completely nullified a mechanic for the entire raid. And that was the main mechanic of the fight, so that makes it a little bit harder to, have to do the mechanic if you don't have the mechanic.
And
going
this
out.
and this is the second time in a row, 2 raids where a shaman could do something to really help. Shut down though. I remember Emerald Sanctum and the Sleeping Dragons.
That is not to really help. That is to completely nullify and remove a mechanic.
Yeah.
The main mechanic of the fight.
I completely. I mean, it feels bad as someone who plays a shaman, as my main raider, to know that a specific raid comp essentially ruined a potential quality of life thing that I could have enjoyed because of that. I'm really glad that the team has maybe in the future can not at least not give us false hope. Because that was all the buzz. It's like, guys, shamans are going to be really valuable on Medivh. And I'm like, oh, let's go.
Shamans are already probably the best healer in Karazhan, just in terms of the fact that they can put out so much raw raid healing. So many bosses are insane high amounts of damage. There are some exception bosses, like on Mephi, outside of the ad phases. It's pretty light on damage.
First boss alone in K40 has so much raid damage.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to characterize the raid as not shaman friendly. There are some places where shamans can shine in all different specs, especially in light of something like Incantagos, right? Where they have the versatility of 3 elemental types, which can really help with comp situations. But it is also a bummer when a very streamlined team can sort of take away something that would otherwise be something in the class kit.
That's that kind of, hey, we're super useful, oh no we're not, that doesn't feel great. So I get where you're coming from with that, but it is good that the team saw the issue, and then how did they deal with it? Just made it so grounding totem cannot absorb that spell?
Yeah, made it so that spell wasn't, as it was intended to, not be nullified by grounding totems.
Oh, so this was like something that wasn't even intended in the first place.
Yeah, that was something where it was not intended that you could just stack shamans to do that. It was not just that seems good, we should nerf it. It was what? They just did a full shaman comp and ignored the mechanic. Oh, okay, let's make that not do. Oh, whoops. It's there are a couple things like that. There were other niche interactions. One that just got fixed last week was that you could interrupt Mephistroph's crystals with gouge.
What?
So they wouldn't explode or enrage.
Huh.
Their beam would stop. And
gouge?
It's little yes. Tiny details like that where they are extremely easy to miss, extremely easy to overlook, but it's a certain level of detail of it needs what we're probably going to do in the future is any mechanic like that, we're going to have a literal check-off sheet of every different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of, okay, there's gouge, there's repentance, there's hand of justice, and have every class's interrupts or stuns or anything like that, and go through for a mechanic and be like, okay, check, that works intended. Check, that works intended. But those are the sort of things that are very easy to overlook in the grand scheme of, okay, that's immune to interrupt. Okay, that's not interrupt, that's whatever. So there's a lot of nuance to different spell types in WoW, and that's one of the small things that is going to get more attention to detail in the future, where
The
we
weird
don't want that to
weird
happen.
disconnect between, let's say, an interrupt like a kick or a pummel or an incapacitate.
Yes.
It's weird and it's tiny, but the devil is very legitimately in the details. Now,
Yeah.
Asking you about a couple of things that the team has learned, Vrograg, I'm going to turn to you and ask you, in retrospective, with K40, what do you want the team to take away from it? What do you think the team should take away from it while we're starting to look at Grimbatol?
Well, I think one thing that Akalix and I definitely agree on is when you have a big content patch that releases, I think if it involves any sort of a raid, holding off on that is good. And it's not just for the purposes of like polish on a raid. I think there's a good reason for it because it allows players to have a chance to explore all the other things. A lot of times people have this mentality of like, I have to be the first to do this, and they get really focused on stuff. But when there's an added waiting period, now, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think the additional waiting period was a lot longer than many people were expecting, and maybe the Turtle Team too, based on, trying to walk into the Kara portal and it says, come to Kara Tower in December. Meanwhile, it was like April. But I recognize that putting additional polish on is good, and giving a patch some time to breathe to work out other kinks too, because something we're not even addressing fully here as well is this was sort of the end point of a long trail of class adjustments following the previous patch. So making sure everything was balanced and in order, I think that is a good call. I like that. And I think as far as things that I think the team can learn from this experience, I can't speak to how to teach them because sometimes they don't want to listen to me, and that's fine. But one thing I think is being really open and honest is really difficult, especially when there are expectations that aren't met. I think the team did a pretty good job, but there's definitely points when things were very frustrating, and I think more outreach on that respect. And that isn't a slight either at Akalix. I saw him in the trenches talking to people all the time. I just I know how difficult it is with such a small team, but I also got to hear a lot of the community voices, a lot of people frustrated how long they had to wait. And there's not really a good remedy to that other than more communication. And that's kind of been my refrain for as long as I've been doing Orc news stuff, is that more communication always is helpful because it's important for the players to know that their voice matters and that there are people that are making the game that are real and actually care about the game. It works both ways, and I'm always going to encourage more of that.
And certainly, Akalix, if you have any thoughts in response to that, now would be the time, if you would like.
I guess the best thing I can really say to that is that it's very easy to say from the perspective of someone who is not on the team that we should communicate more. And as a general idea, I do agree with that. But it gets more complicated when you get into the details of how and what we will communicate on behalf of the team. Specifically looking at it in terms of there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes constantly. At all times, there is at least 20 moving parts of something's happening here, something's happening there, something's happening there. Our content pipeline right now, we have stuff that's not going to be coming out until probably 2027 that's in the works right now. And that's not because, someone is slacking or this person needs to be doing more, that person needs to be doing more. It's a matter of just a lot of stuff takes a while to do because it has to go through each different stage of development, from design to modeling to development to balance to back to design to QA, all through a bunch of different hoops and phases where every step of the way it's getting sent back to the guy before that because, actually I want this changed too. So it's a very difficult thing to communicate as much as some people would want. And I don't just mean that in terms of, we're not going to talk about it. And like there's a lot of communication that I do agree could be improved on. But there is also the struggle of there are some, for like a lot of this Kara development period, there are people who are very upset that we didn't communicate more. And to them, my sort of question generally was, what do you want communicated? That yes, we're still developing Kara. Yes, it's still soon. Because we're not going to give a date when we can't give a firm date. That's not something we're ever going to do. It's something that's blown up in our face when we've tried to before. So it's always going to be a soon. And until we have it to basically be ready to be shipped, we're not giving dates on any of our releases. The closest to that is we'll say it'll probably be this summer for 1.18, for example.
Yeah, and I also want to qualify too, not trying just to single out the team as like, what more communication could be useful. It's also really useful if the community does a better job of listening and also trying to understand the reality of how things are. It's difficult, and being patient patience is a virtue. It's very difficult. And I think that's something broadly that, and this is a much broader topic. I'm not going to dip too far into this, Dan, don't worry. But I think, I even think we've touched upon it, but there's like a certain culture that comes over from Blizzard playing players where there's an antagonism between the community and Blizzard that I feel sometimes gets carried over and sometimes misdirected at the Turtle team. And so I do also want to stress that that's also not helpful. That's as unhelpful as the team being silent. So I think we can all do better in those situations where some kind of a expectation wasn't met to try to understand what's going on. As a community, we can do better. And I'm sure Akalix would agree there's spots where the team could have done better, right? So we can all do better in those moments. And you did ask me if there's anything I think the team could do better, and so but I did want to qualify that everyone had a hand in their own misery.
That's totally fair, and I think to kind of put like a nice bow on this conversation, a little like gift wrap, if you will. A phrase that has been drilled into me since I started working in broadcasting. We're going like way back to 2005 here. Communication is a two-way street. If it's being done improperly, it's a one-way street. Done correctly, it is a two-way street. Both parties have to be involved. Even with a PR announcement, even when it comes to trying to communicate to a large community, the community needs to be responsive and respectful to it. So certainly there's room for all of us to improve, but lessons are learned in this situation, and we're all moving forward that much better. With that being said, we're a little over time on this segment. Obviously, we had a lot to say about Kara 40 and a retrospective on it. I want to go ahead and move on here. We're going to go ahead and take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about what's coming up here, the next few pieces of content. We've already seen an awesome trailer for one, and there's plenty more where that came from. So more of a look under the shell coming up right after this. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting with the in-game radio widget. Welcome back to A Look Under the Shell. Myself, Dan, Vrograg, and Akalix. We are going to be talking about future content now. We talked in the retrospective of Kara 40 and what the team learned and how the community reacted. Now it is time to talk about what's to come. Now, while we do have the roadmap that Turtle put out the other year, now that I realize it was the other year, it's not necessarily that granular for each major patch or each minor patch even. So, Akalix, in the next content patch, what are we in general looking at?
So just in general of what we're looking at in the coming patches. Next one on the docket is Scars of the Past, which is coming this summer most likely. That's going to include stuff like new zones, Northwind, Grim Reaches, Baylor. Those are all leveling zones. That's the 28 to 38 bracket roughly. Then there is 2 new dungeons in that area. That would be Dragonmaw Retreat and Stormrot Ruins, which also cover roughly that same sort of level range of 25 to 41. And there's going to be some dungeon extensions tossed in there. Razorfang Crawl, Zoo of Farak, Blackfathom Deeps, Razorfang Downs. A new arena, Sunstrider Court, which should be for 2v2 arenas, as well as the Northwatch Keep PvP event should be functionally implemented as well. And then obviously after that, if you look on our development roadmap, is Nightmares of Ursul, which will sort of be... Scars of the Past is pretty leaned towards more open world leveling content, because that is one of our main things, is making leveling content, whether that's for your first character or for your alt. We do target a little bit more to the person who's just doing leveling and stuff, not focusing entirely on endgame as the only thing to do.
I love that. I love that this next patch in particular. You said 28 to 41, which, while there is content in that range, obviously getting to 40 and get into Tanaris and getting into a few other zones, that feels like a real breath of fresh air. So getting a little more content to get people between the mid 20s and late 30s, I really love that, because otherwise I'm pretty much sitting in Scarlet Monastery.
Yeah, I've been leveling up a character recently, and I too have felt that strange squeeze right around that same level area. So that's actually very encouraging to hear that's... I mean, it's always been a focus for Turtle WoW, much to their credit, and I'm glad that it's continuing to do so.
Now, beyond that, we're looking in Nightmares of Ursul to target a little bit more towards some more endgame content. Obviously, with more like PvP events, with 2 more open world PvP events is the goal for that one, as well as another new arena, Ruins of Lordaeron, a survival overhaul, and the part that I'm really excited for is starting to do some raid extensions.
I'm sorry, raid extensions? So like instance extensions, but for raids?
Yes.
You're just going to drop a bomb on us like that.
Included in that is Onyxia, as well as I know that we have Molten Core in the works right now. I don't know if Molten Core is slated for that patch or not. It might come a little bit later, but I have seen that Molten Core extension is getting worked on now. So that is very well something that is close in the pipeline, as well as Timbermaw Hold as a absolutely beautiful mega dungeon is in the works too.
So that's where Nightmares of Ursul comes from. Interesting.
Yep. As well as Moonwhisper Coast being a closer to end game max level zone that will have a lot of ties to the Furbolg story.
Moonwhisper Coast sounds... So I'm specifically thinking about the start of the Night Elf campaign from Frozen Throne. That sounds eerily similar. And I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly or not. And you probably can't say anything, but that's what I'm thinking
I don't think
of.
he knows.
You don't think I played Warcraft 3?
I've played Warcraft 3, but I played it when you were in diapers.
Oh, Jesus.
And I played it when it was already a retro game.
Oh, come
Yeah,
on.
no,
Don't do that. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on. Like a lot of, let's be perfectly frank. Some of the early lore of Warcraft was pretty rough around the edges. So even if you remember it, it might not have been that great. So when you remember stuff, I'm like, that's cool. But there's some great story points that really stand out. But remembering some of that errata from years ago, I'm like,
So you two don't have a photographic memory of the Warcraft 1 manual?
oh, no, not. I have a photograph of it.
Look at this photograph.
Exactly. I mean, there's PDFs out there like that. That's good enough. I can remember other things like how long the IEA cooldown is before I can put up another slice and dice. Like that's the important stuff.
Or you could just play Warrior and smash your face on the keyboard and you get good results.
As long as the first one's Sunder.
The good Warriors have Sunder macroed to their heroic strike. I'm just saying.
I think they have it. They have it like key bound to like their inhales. I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Full body glove Turtle WoW technology coming 2027. You heard it here first, folks.
Let's get out of this hole we've dug ourselves into, in me feeling old, and focus on a lot of what Akalix just talked about, which was new world content, new PvP, and specifically arenas. So, what is this about arenas?
So there are 2 new arenas that are slated for the next one in each of the next 2 patches. There's Sunstrider Court and Ruins of Lordaeron. Sunstrider Court being a high elf themed one, in Ruins of Lordaeron, you can probably guess.
We could take a stab.
Yeah. And the general idea is those are going to go kind of tied together with the idea that we're putting a little bit more time into some PvP touch-ups now, because it's nobody is fooling anyone. PvP is the place that has received the least dev time on Turtle, and that's something where, well, we are a PV back to ancient times of one realm for being all that Turtle had. It was a RP PvE realm. PvP was not really a big draw for the realm. But now, in the era of Turtle having 2 European realms, handful of Chinese realms, and a realm in South America, suddenly, okay, PvP is, something that should get some actual attention. And so we're adding in stuff like these new arenas, these open world events, and I don't know if you saw it, but a while back here in the end of March, I put out a thread about some potential changes to PvP coming. Some stuff like an honor rework, some stuff like a rated PvP system, some itemization updates, stuff like that to sort of try to change up how PvP on Turtle specifically works. Because vanilla PvP it's fun, but it's not the most sustainable mode. Because it's a lot of being the new guy means you're paying your dues of being just beaten on relentlessly.
Yeah.
And that's not great for getting new guys to come in.
Yeah, and there's new players too that want to learn PvP, and it's very difficult when you're looking at that as your prospect.
Yeah, and the reward for it is overall not as good as it should be, in terms of, if you want to go in, you just hit 60, you want to go PvP, you're going to get nuked by some guy who's in full purples, probably mostly Nax geared, just going to 2-shot you. And then the reward you get is, after a couple weeks of doing that each day, you're going to get gear that is still worse than theirs.
Yeah. It is tough. But I mean, there is clearly some interest in PvP. I did hear recently that Telebim had over 2K last weekend concurrent players. So clearly there's some interest in PvP.
That's pretty impressive numbers right there, actually, all things considered.
Shout outs to Telebim.
Absolutely. And speaking of Telebim, Akalix, when it comes to these PvP changes, I know you said you put out a little bit of information. Did you get any information from community leaders over on the Telebim side of things? Any feedback from them leading up to what's going to be going into this patch? Or are you guys not there yet when it comes to even presenting anything to the community?
Obviously, like, I put out that thread to get feedback and stuff, but I'm not going to work one-on-one with a guild from one realm about content that applies to everyone. There are people on Nordinar who have been PvPing on Turtle for longer than TAs even existed, right?
Sure.
So why would that be fair to them if I were to go to someone who joined when we had new PvP fresh? And then on the flip side, if I talk to those people who've been PvPing on Nord for all these years, how would that be fair to the person on TA who, well, I play on a PvP realm, they don't? It's a matter of the forum thread is where to leave your opinions and feedback, as well as in various individual threads of your own. We're not going and working with like specific groups of people of like, okay, you design this for us. No, it's being done by us. So stuff like these, we've already talked a decent bit about how we think we want to do certain things. And we've already established a handful of things that we are pretty sure we want to do. But it's not something where we're announcing it just yet, because it's something where we're still waiting for people to be able to leave all of their thoughts and feedback, as well as we're also not there yet in terms of, okay, we're going to get this developed and get this out and get this done. It's like, even when we want to with certain things, we don't just leapfrog through the development process.
Sure.
And that's one thing is we have obviously goals of getting some of those things in sooner than later, but we have years of content in the pipeline going all the way out to probably 2027 or maybe even 2028. And that's stuff that we have in development now. And that could be just design doc outlines done, or that could be models done. There's stuff that I've seen personally that isn't on the roadmap as of yet, like for example a Molten Core extension, or for example a Grim Totem Torn dungeon.
Oh, don't tempt me here.
Oh, you tempt me. I like the sounds of that. I like the sounds of that.
What I was gonna say too is, especially with the South American server, that's a fresh server, so certainly what Nordinar is going to see as a server may not necessarily be the same thing that the South American server sees, at least for a few years. Like, for example, they're not going to see Kara 40 until next year, at least.
Oh, yeah. And if you ask them what the problems with PvP are, you're going to get very different answers. Yeah. And obviously, some of the answers will probably overlap. There will be some overlap of, oh, well, it sucks that the like dominant ranking, the most dominant way to rank is by half AFKing for 14 hours a day in Arathi Basin, as opposed to actually going and fighting people.
Yeah, I mean, the team has done some stuff, right? Yeah, like the team did at least make that adjustment that you don't like you keep your highest rank, I believe, which
decay is limited to the rank that you're at.
Yeah. Right, and I think that in and of itself was probably one of the biggest pain points of ranking up, and I'm glad the team addressed that. But I don't think anyone's particularly in love with ranking and that system. And I think a compounding factor with designing PvP and how much more difficult I imagine it will be for the team is now there are we're sort of in uncharted territory because of class changes, right? So there's some classes that never had the ability to do certain things that now they can, which does change a lot of the PvP dynamics.
Now, one thing you mentioned there is new dungeons. Now we know of the ones that are coming up sooner rather than later. The Dragon Maw dungeon, and then something Stormwrought. What did you call it?
Stormwrought Ruins.
Stormwrought Ruins. Those we've kind of got inklings of. We obviously had the trailer come out a month or so ago for the Dragon Maw dungeon. What's Stormwrought Ruins?
Stormwrought Ruins is more of a human ruins area. That's going to be for the 35 to 41 level bracket.
I think we've seen some illustrations from that too. If that splash page is from that.
I believe it was shown a little bit in the Nixium 1.18 content outline.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And is it connected to any of the new zones that we're going to be experiencing?
I believe it is in Baylor.
Gotcha. Okay.
I could be incorrect in that, but I believe it is.
And then you tease me because you mentioned a Tauren dungeon. I'm just going to ask you to please talk about it.
That's one that we haven't really shown much off about yet. We haven't given a name or a release time for yet, where it's still in the process of the model being finished. But it's something that is it's a very solid example of something that is in the works right now that helps illustrate my point of we have constantly things in the works that are not even announced yet, things that are completely unknown to the outside world, but in there somewhere. So it's one of the matters of like, it seems weird how we will just say, okay, yeah, we want to do that eventually, and then you'll see it on our roadmap in 2 years from now. For example, the Zulaman, and how we discussed Runes of Silvermoon raid, but those are in Echoes of Quel'Thalas, which isn't slated until next year at least. Like that, it seems like, well, if you want to do it, just do it. But we have so many things that we want to do, and it's a matter of just finding where does that or where does anything else fit in our timeline, in our process of getting content out the door, because there's so much content to be made and to be released, and it's a matter of we would love to have it all out now, but we are an overall small team compared to what we do. Like, we have probably one of the biggest teams in the entire private server scene. I don't know the details of a server like Ascension. They very well could have more than us. They probably honestly do, just because of the amount of insane dev work they do. But we are by far bigger than any other like vanilla private server, for example.
Sure.
But
and
compared to a game studio, we're fairly small.
And you guys are like small independent size.
Yeah, we are the small indie company in question.
And here's the thing too, and I think people need to take this into consideration. Even when someone says, "Hey, do this piece of content," and the team is like, "Yeah, we're going to do that piece of content," it's still a 3 years later process. It isn't you get to snap your finger and the content is made. You have to put so much time and effort into the crafting, the creation, the writing, the polishing, the editing, the audio. There's so many different levels and layers that need to go into everything that happens. So it's really important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think something that bears mentioning here is that the team has, because they have this roadmap, I think something that can get lost is that someone will hear something about Rumbatol, right? And then they have it in their head that that's going to be the next patch. The fact of the matter is the team is in a state where maybe previously, like back before, 2023 and like the 2021 days, 2022, whatever they had coming was what they were talking about. But the team has grown enough, I think, that they're sort of staggering what they have coming up. So they'll be working on stuff while they're releasing stuff. And we can see that because, at least as far as I'm aware, and I don't know if Akalix can confirm or deny this, but like there's been work done on all of these things concurrently with the release of Karazhan 40, for instance. So like, that's something to bear in mind, that all these things require different levels of work and different amounts of time. And so, yeah, it's not right around the corner for some things, but they're all being done at the same time.
Yeah, it's something where, because of the scale of our team now, we're able to work on more than one thing at a time, which is great.
It's very exciting, actually.
It would be so much slower to be getting these things out just because of, well, we would need the same guy who's doing that to also be doing something else, who'd also need to be doing something else. And for like an example, a lot of people would say, like, there were people who were getting frustrated when we were posting like teasers leading up to Karazhan's release of other stuff, basically saying, why are you working on that? Why aren't you working on Karazhan? And I had to repeatedly explain to like a bunch of people, because a good number of people don't know the nuance of it. The people who are working on, like, for example, when you're getting a Northwind teaser waiting for Kara to come out, it's not because, oh, we're not working on Karazhan today, we're working on Northwind because we want to go work on Northwind instead. It's because the person who's making Northwind is not needed right now for Karazhan. It's limited by people who are doing like actual programmer work for Karazhan towards the end there. We're very limited on who all can do that. So, okay, we're waiting on the people who can do that to finish it, whereas the people who can't do programming work but can do stuff like Nogget work, for example, are working on the next zones in Nogget and stuff like that, where if we said, okay, nope, we're just doing Karazhan, and until Karazhan's released, that's all we work on, then we'd be looking at many more months until we're getting out 1.18 compared to where it's going to release. Just because, well, there's that period of design, and then of writing quests, of mapping the area. Then, okay, we're QAing that. We're getting any custom WMOs in there. We're getting, like, it's a extensive process, and something where a lot of that happens not in sync with other things, but in parallel, in tandem, to where we have someone who's working on a new open world area right now, and then we're going to have someone 3D model a couple custom buildings for that area, and we're going to have the writers put in quests for that area, and QA is going to go through and going to read those and make sure the quests function, and make sure that, those all happen. And then we'll have an actual programmer who, okay, we need a jousting script, so they're going to program the if named jouster then joust, however it works. I'm not a programmer.
You're giving me flashbacks to the Crusaders Colosseum from Wrath.
Oh no.
And I don't like that. Don't do that.
You didn't like that whole waiting period before the raid that everyone wanted to do happened?
So, okay, I'm going to drop a bomb here, and then I'm going to close the show out, because that's just what I do. I liked Wrath. However, Ulduar and the Crusaders Colosseum were a major low point. And I honestly think Crusaders Colosseum was one of the worst pieces of content that I've seen in WoW.
I can't agree with Uldum.
Yeah, I'm actually going to push. I'm going to push back on that one, but I agree with you about the Colosseum.
It's the vehicles, the vehicle mechanics, the worst.
I'll agree. The vehicles suck.
It is very polarizing. Absolutely, I understand that part, but like saying it's outright bad, I'm like,
there were some good encounters in Ulduar, like Algalon the Observer, one of the best boss fights in the game, easily.
I mean, the thing that kills me is that, like, the guy on the box, I want to fight him. Why can't I fight him? Like, what's wrong with you guys? Sorry, that was my beef. That had been Dan's studio, but everyone knows about that.
Yeah. That's fair. Okay. Is there anything, and Akalix, I'm going to turn to you first. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our conversation? I know we have covered so much here, and we are out of time, but is there anything else you want to add before we close up shop?
Not really. Just sort of the reminder to people of, I know that I've talked about a lot of stuff that, oh, we're looking to do this, looking to do that. Don't think that means that we have forgotten about other things. Don't think that means like, oh, what happened to logs? Did we forget about logs? No, but the person who is mostly working on logs is also the person who's mostly working on launcher. So getting
Shout out
launcher, shout out to, he's done fantastic work with the launcher. It is probably our number one best thing that we have done in terms of onboarding new players who are not WoW nerd veterans.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably our biggest win in terms of the average dad gamer, where I like to use the example of where I can tell my dad, download the launcher, you can put on all your mods from there, and then your WoW's not going to be laggy.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's a small thing of like, oh, well, why can't they just download it manually? Well, because not everyone is good with computers. Some people just don't, and some people just don't want to have that level of investment with a random game that they don't play already. Because obviously a Turtle Law veteran is going to be like, sure, okay, yeah, I'm invested, I want to make my game better. But a new player experience of spend 30 minutes downloading these mods that flag your antivirus, and like that sucks. No one wants that. So that's a tremendous win. I love the launcher. I love what it's done for new player acquisition.
I'll hard agree. The launcher has been a blessing, and I know some people really didn't like it to start with, but no matter what your first impression was, where it is now and where it has been lately, massive blessing.
Yeah, I mean, even though I can definitely report that many people struggled with it early, the one thing I will say about the launcher is that the team stuck to their guns. There's no good way to open a launcher to an existing community. And I mean, most people who understood what a launcher meant knew that there was going to be growing pains. And I'm genuinely very happy. I'm even proud of the Turtle team for sticking to their guns, working through the difficulty, and just slowly over time getting it more and more right to now it's really actually serving the community, not causing everyone to flip out at them.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the examples of things that are little projects that we've said over time. Yeah, we're going to make a better way to launch the client. We're going to make these client improvements. We're going to make a launcher at some point so you don't have to use the community made ones, et cetera, where it seems like it goes to the wayside, but it's something that we're working on. Same with logs, where it's something where we wanted to have that in on patch release, couldn't get it in by then, but we have the data side of it in. We just need the user side of it in. And same with stuff like plenty of other systems where we've said, or features that we've said, hey, yeah, we're going to do this at some point, but that some point hasn't shown up yet. And to some people that's okay, did you just forget? But I just want to say, like, no, we haven't forgotten about your favorite addition or feature that you would really like. If you want to remind us, feel free to post in the comments of the YouTube video or on the forums about like, hey, can you guys give us an update on when this is coming? And I'd be happy to answer that and say like, hey, logs, we're looking at trying to get that out sometime soon, or world boss changes, we're looking to probably do that by at the latest the next big patch of 1.18. Stuff like that.
Write that down.
But it's something where
if you write it down, it's science.
Yeah.
It also means that Akalix publicly said it, therefore it is news.
And therefore it is guaranteed true.
And Akalix's blood pressure rose 3 times that day.
Yeah.
Vrograg, same question to you. Anything you want to say to close up shop here?
Yeah. This is a bit of this show was about Karazhan 40 retrospective and looking to the future. And one thing that I know I wanted to say to the community is that there is a new raid tier. And I know there's a lot of raid teams that are struggling with it. And what I want to encourage everyone to do is, just because a raid exists doesn't mean it needs to be done every week. Remember that the goal of the game is to have fun. If you're feeling burnt out, if you don't like what you're doing, be honest with yourself, be honest with the people you play with, because that's how you end up having a bad relationship with a game. And I know with an additional raid coming out, I've seen it in multiple places, people feeling the burnout. Take a deep breath, assess your priorities, and ask yourself if you're having fun. There's plenty of other games to play even, and there's plenty of other ways to play Turtle WoW too. So keep that in mind. I like the community, and just because there's more to do doesn't mean you need to do all of it. It's okay. That's been my big message.
There's never a bad time to go out and touch a little grass.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you're in a better mood, if you're in a better disposition, you as a community member in Turtle WoW are more likely to bring better vibes to the community. So let's remember that too. You know, we want good vibes here.
We do indeed. That's a great note to close on. I want to thank you both, Akalix and Vrograg. You showed up strong on this episode, and it really shined. This was a great one. Next episode will be later on this summer, towards the end of the summer, and hopefully we have another content patch to speak on. But if not, we have plenty else to cover as we take another look under the shell. Bye-bye now.